I think the intellectual revolution that's going on now to restore liberty in this country is well on its way, and there's no way they're going to stop the momentum that we have started.
Special guest on from Virginia tonight. His name is Jared Hendrix, and he was a delegate to the RNC, and he's also worked on. He was a state coordinator for South Dakota for Liberty. He was the state director for the Ron Paul campaign in North Dakota. And he's also a representative on the State Central Committee in Virginia's 3rd Congressional District. We had Christopher Stearns from Virginia on 3 weeks ago, I think it was, and he is also from the 3rd District. Both Jared and Chris have done a lot to promote the cause of liberty, and so that's why we're going to talk to Jared about his experiences and everything that he has seen in this, and where we can go from here.
I think he has a lot for all of us to hear, so that'll be interesting. Virginia has done a lot, but not many people have heard about it. I mean, everybody talks about Nevada and Maine all the time, but not Virginia. I think this will be cool. And this weekend is the Liberty Fest in Nashville, so if you can make it, try to make it. Otherwise, we will be live streaming it. So stay tuned. The Liberty Live Fest starts at 4 p.m. Saturday and goes till midnight. That should be good. And Jared is calling in tonight, so if there's any sound problems, just let us know, because this is the first time that we're actually having somebody call in instead of just being on the computer. Hey. Alright, you on? Yes, it goes till midnight. It is indoors, though, the Liberty Fest, so every party is supposed to go late, right? But it's at the Music City Festival inside, so it shouldn't be too cold.
All right, guys, we have Jared Hendrix on the show right now. He's calling in, so we will have him on. Jared, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, I want to first start with how you got involved with the Liberty Movement and all the Ron Paul campaign and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, I just got started, same as about anybody else. I got started, heard about him on the internet, and eventually went to some meetup groups and got involved and started waving signs on street corners, and eventually I decided to advance from that and learn a little bit more about the process, and got involved as an activist with Campaign for Liberty, and we were very active in Virginia over the last few years, thanks to the leadership of Lana Holt and people like that who worked really hard. And eventually, after volunteering for a few years, I guess I just got noticed, and I had an opportunity to work for the Ron Paul campaign, and I took that opportunity when it came.
Great. Well, could you share some of your experiences? I know you worked in a couple states. What states have you exactly worked in, and what have your experiences been there?
Well, I live in Virginia, a lifelong Virginia resident, and when I got hired about a year ago with the Ron Paul campaign, I was hired on as the North Dakota State Director. So I was in North Dakota for about 5 or 6 months. I went up there with a good buddy of mine, Trevor Benson, who was our field director, who was also from Virginia. And then it was after that that I went to South Dakota for a little while, after the campaign had decided to suspend its primary operations. I decided to go there and help out with the grassroots there for a little while. But I was only in South Dakota for less than a month. But otherwise, everything I've done has been in Virginia.
What was your role in Virginia as far as organizing people and getting people involved with the Ron Paul campaign and organizing for delegates and all that kind of stuff?
Well, basically, since I was in North Dakota during most of the course of the 2012 campaign, I didn't really do a whole lot for Virginia until after the North Dakota State Convention, which was the first week of April. It really is to credit of the grassroots here, and Chris Stern, the state director, and others who worked really hard and were able to get this whole state organized. So I didn't have too much to do with it until early April, actually about mid-April. I came back to Virginia from North Dakota, and it had been about a month or so after one day Chris Stearns called me and just said, hey, do you want to run for State Central Committee? And I said, well, I'm in North Dakota, but I guess sure. I don't often say no to Chris, so I just decided to run for State Central. So when I got back to North Dakota, that was the number one priority. I had to play catch up with Virginia politics. I kind of missed out on the last few months, and got involved in the 3rd District activities, and we went and called folks and picked up delegate forms and really focused on high turnout in that district. And we ran Liberty candidates for all 3 State Central spots. Chris Stearns obviously ran as chairman, and we also ran folks for national delegate and alternate, and we won everything. We won everything all across the board. And then it was after that I went to South Dakota and went on that excursion.
Was there, in working with the campaigns, is there anything that you would, any lessons that you learned that would be good to either not do, or things that you learned that would be good to do again in the future if we are able to put like another Liberty candidate forward in a few years?
Hey, I'm sorry. I think I missed the first part of your question.
Sorry about that. What is the experiences that you had with the campaign? Is there anything that you saw that you would prefer not to think we shouldn't do again, or any lessons that you learned that we should keep in mind for future races that actually, that was good?
Well, I guess, that could probably take a whole week to answer, really, because there's a lot that I've learned over the last year. But in general, I'll say that I think what has happened during the course of the 2012 campaign, you had a lot of people that came into the campaign who were liberty-minded, who were ideologically pure. And I think one of the lessons learned is that you look at some of the other campaigns, and they tend to hire people who are ruthless political operatives, but who, quite frankly, get the job done. And I think that there were a lot of folks in the Paul campaign. There are some very good, dedicated folks, but then there's also a lot of new people. And I think this whole experience for a lot of them was basically a learning experience. I think the 2012 Ron Paul campaign was the training ground for basically the future of, probably the future of the Republican Party, and certainly the future of the Liberty movement. So I think that the most important thing in general is that we have to learn to transfer our beliefs into political action. And Ron Paul is a teacher. That's what he essentially is. He's taught us about this philosophy, spread the message farther and to a greater extent than it has in decades. But there's a difference between the philosophy and political action. Philosophy is point B, and we're at point A. And I think that you have to learn the process and be even sometimes a little pragmatic in how you implement it. It doesn't mean that your philosophy is pragmatic. Your philosophy should stay the same, but you can be pragmatic in how you go about it. So I think that's the most important thing. I encourage everybody to get onto a campaign, just start volunteering. I volunteered for 3 years before I ever actually worked for a campaign. So I would suggest getting on, volunteering, seeing what goes into a campaign. It's not the kind of thing that comes from just purely educating. If we understand the philosophy and we believe in it and we put it forth, we got to understand the average voter doesn't think that way. The average voter doesn't get the whole picture. So I think understanding the difference between effective political action and educating the people is very important.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that, because that's where we have to start with. And a lot of people don't understand. I think a lot of people don't realize what can be done working within the party and working with politicians, because it can be hard for us to imagine working with some people who aren't completely liberty-minded. But if we can do that, then I think we can have a good chance of changing the way things actually run. And that's one thing I wanted you to address. Could you explain the accomplishments that you guys have done in Virginia, and particularly like with taking over the state central committee and things like that, and changing some of your party rules to make it so that liberty candidates actually have a better chance there, and how it can help to work within the Republican Party to change it back to, restore it back to where it really is supposed to be?
Yeah, that is something that has been very interesting here in Virginia over the last few months. In addition to taking quite a few delegate spots to Tampa, we did Liberty folks, Ron Paul supporters, along with the coalition of various conservative activists in the state. We did take a majority of the Republican State Central Committee in Virginia. As I said earlier, I was elected to that. And that is basically the governing body of the party here. And one of the things that we were able to do is we were able to change the nominating method from a primary to a convention for the 2013 elections. Because in Virginia we have our gubernatorial elections in odd number of years in 2013. So that's important because we know from experience that our candidates and our liberty-minded folks tend to be a little more favored in the convention process. And also, I feel like just as a party officer, it's responsible, because I think that it makes sure that we only have those who are dedicated to supporting the principles that the party claims that it believes in, showing up at these conventions. It makes it a little easier. When you have a primary, you can have a candidate who has a lot of name ID and might be able to raise $5 or $10 million and just send out a bunch of mailers and run a bunch of TV ads, and then they win. But if you have a convention process, that means you as a candidate, or even as a campaign staffer, and you're going face-to-face with Republican Party members and delegates at these meetings, and if you can't convince them and sell yourself to them, you're not going to be able to buy your way out of it.
What would you say to people who say that working within the GOP or the Republican Party is just going to get us, has gotten us to where we are today in this mess?
I don't agree with that personally. I actually look back over the course of the last several decades, and I think the failure has been that we haven't been involved really at all, or certainly not often enough. With that said, I'm not being insensitive. I understand that we've seen abuses and violations of the rules over the course of the last year and really over the last 4 years. So I understand that, and I've seen it firsthand. But I will tell you, it's ultimately a numbers game. If you show up in high enough numbers, you win. There are always some exceptions to that. They can pull tricks, but 9 out of 10 times, that's the way it works. And I think we also have to be a little bit careful about just demonizing the opposition. You know, I can tell you when I ran for state central, there were a lot of folks that voted for me, certainly from my home city, who were delegates who were definitely not Ron Paul supporters. I mean, some of them were, in fact, pretty big Romney donors. But they voted for me because they've met me over the course of the last few years. I've been at these meetings. I've participated in the process. And so they familiarize themselves with you, and you start to build relationships. I think it's silly to demonize or oppose somebody totally, even if you might agree with them, 70%. I mean, why are you going to fight them day and night because of 30%? I think you should work together on that 70%. You build relationships. And, of course, when it comes time to support your candidate, then you may be on opposite sides. But I think we need to be very careful about too quickly demonizing the other side.
Yeah, we would agree, definitely. We've seen that in our state here, particularly with our chairman, who has a lot of bad things that he's done against us, but now he wants to work with us. And we've gotten a lot of flack for being willing to do that because of where he doesn't like us. But it's like, I'm going to take a man for what he says right now. And he wants to work with me. I know what I can do, and we can hope that it will change the party in the right direction. What I wanted to ask about what your thoughts are on the third party, voting for a third party or promoting people to go over to a third party and work with that.
Well, I certainly don't want to tell anybody what to do. I mean, people can do what they want to do. Personally, my view is that as long as the election laws stay as they are, ballot access laws, it's not really possible for a third-party independent candidate to break through unless they're celebrity, they have billions of dollars, or they just have massive name ID through some other avenue. So that's not going to change until the election laws change, and the election laws aren't going to change until you get people elected to change them, and the only way to get people elected is through one of the two major parties. So does that mean that I think that everything's A-OK, or that I think we have a million years ahead of us to work out all these problems, that I don't think we have serious economic issues? Well, no, we do have very bad problems, and our time may be somewhat limited, but as long as the system is there, I think we should use it. And I think that anybody who thinks that our entire system is broken, anybody who thinks that it's pointless to continue to fight as an activist, I think they need to reassess that, because I can tell you that the system does work. It might be slow, it might be corrupt, there might be a lot of problems, but it does work. And there's also a lot of advantages to it working very slowly. The founders, of course, they didn't envision a party system like this, but they did put in place a process that was that works very slowly, and I think it's a very good thing.
Yeah, definitely agreed. What do you state? What is your stance on, just personal stance mainly, on Gary Johnson and if he really fits the libertarian ideals or not? Because there's a lot of people who say he was running the Libertarian Party, and but some of the ideals that he stands for, from what I've seen, don't really fit with the true libertarianism, as in the small L, not the big L. What is your view on that, on Gary Johnson?
Well, Gary Johnson in particular, I think he was an admirable governor. I think he did a lot for New Mexico under difficult circumstances. I mean, it's a 2-to-1 Democratic state, and he was able to accomplish quite a bit, I think, in a short period of time. And I think because he was an outsider, again, in a 2-to-1 Democratic state, I think it was kind of unexpected, and the planets were aligned, so to speak. But again, I think this goes to the question of effective political action. And what I talked about earlier about the difference between education and effective political action. I mean, somebody might perfectly embody the values and principles and the philosophy that you believe in, but the actual political process and the actual process of getting elected is separate from that. So I think that, and I want to say this as respectfully as I can, because I've got a lot of friends who are actively supporting Gary, and they're out there and they're working very hard, and I certainly I'm not going to go and tell somebody to not do that. But I've also had some individuals who support him, but have actually condemned me for the work that I've done within the party, and have told me that I've wasted my time. But I certainly wouldn't fire that back at them, because I'm not going to tell anybody that they're wasting their time if they're doing something they believe in. But in general, I think we need to work where we can most effectively apply ourselves, and in my opinion, that means some of these local races. I'm involved in some local races here in Virginia right now, because I see the presidential races. Despite all the good intentions and hard work and effort, I don't think that we're going to be able to change very much about that. Whereas all that time and energy and money, if it were applied to, say, a local school board candidate or a campus city council, you could actually win that. And so, again, it's just a personal preference of mine. I feel that I should channel my energy and any expertise that I have into races where I can actually affect the outcome of it.
Yeah, local races is really where it counts. I don't think a lot of people realize that. I'll come back to that in just a minute, but there were a couple questions a couple people asked.
Yeah, how do you think that we should deal with the GOP rules that they passed at the convention this year?
Well, I think that they're going to have to change. Obviously, there were a lot of changes that they tried to get through, some of which they didn't. Of course, Rule 12 is pretty bad. It permits the RNC to change national rules between conventions, and I think it's pretty obvious that that is going to be abused. But, here's an example of why it's so important to continue to be involved in the party. And I can just tell you from my personal experience, which might be a little bit unique, I was one of probably only 30 or 40 people at the RNC in 2008 who were Paul supporters. That number might not be accurate. I'm just taking a guess. And so from my point of view, to go from that 4 years ago to seeing this year, hundreds of Paul supporters at the RNC, I mean, that was profound to me. Mm-hmm. And seeing, 191 delegate votes cast for Ron Paul, despite all the other problems, I thought that was extraordinary. And I think it really shows how far we've come. And I know some folks may look at that and they may not agree with me, and they may think that's pitiful, but I can tell you that is enormous success. It takes a long time normally to make those kind of inroads, and we did it relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. So the point is, the more of our people that get involved and stay involved, we can start to take some of these national committeemen and national committeewoman positions, and when we take those, then we will control the rules. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to have to be the long-term goal. I do think that the Rule 12 is probably going to end up having a backlash. I personally think that there's going to be pressure to change that back. And again, I could be wrong, but that's just my personal opinion. I think that it was obvious they went too far, and I think they know they went too far.
Yeah, definitely. The advances we made in the last 4 years is amazing. And so that's why I think people need to understand that staying involved is what's most important. And when I was told after I came back from Tampa that the revolution within the Republican Party is a myth, and I'm going, really? Where has this person been the last 4 years? Have they not seen what all has gone on? So it's I'll ask the one question about this again in a second. She has another question here, but
just since you're from Virginia, somebody asked what you thought about Virgil Boone.
Virgil Boone, I've never met him personally. I have a lot of friends who know him and who would like him a lot. I think he was a pretty decent congressman. In Congress, because he lost in 2008 by a pretty slim margin, because it was Obama's year, I think. It was unexpected, but I think he probably holds some views on different cultures that some people who call themselves libertarians may not agree with. But by and large, I think he was a pretty good congressman, and I think he might have a pretty dramatic effect on the election here in Virginia. If he pulls 15-20% out of his own congressional district, well, that could end up swinging the state one way or the other. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
well, that'll be interesting. Well, just a few more questions here. I'm sorry, what?
You next, yours.
No. Since we are getting near the end of our time, or we're not too pressed on time, but we have a little bit longer. What would you say to people of not have them, how was it, how they do that?
Follow Adam Kokesh or Tom Woods. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by this.
How would you keep them involved instead of following Kokesh and Tom Woods is what people ask.
Well, I think that they have to look at things long term, and I don't know exactly what you're referring to with Kokesh or Woods. I know there's been some bit of a rift, but I guess that's what you're getting at. There's been obviously a rift that some people see between maybe the Campaign for Liberty folks or the campaign and some of the grassroots. I do think there is something of a rift, and I've tried my best to always keep people on the same page and understand that we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves. I even talked to John Tate about this at LPAC recently, and he agreed with me that there are some problems and we have some mending to do. But in general, I go back to my earlier point that the system we have does work. If enough people show up, you win. And just a little case in point here, an example in the 3rd District at Virginia, as I said earlier, Ron Paul people took over the party in the 3rd District. And we have a congressman here who is a longtime Democratic congressman. He's been in there 20 years. A couple years ago, he voted against auditing the Fed. Now, fast forward to where we are here, and we control the district, and we have a nominee here, Dean Longo in the 3rd District, who is certainly not a strict libertarian, but he's very open-minded, and he's listened to a lot of what we've said, and he started pushing for the Fed audit, and we started putting pressure. And when this vote came up this past July on the Fed audit, guess what? Bobby Scott voted for auditing the Fed. So I'm telling you, the system does work, and I think too often everybody wants some kind of a shortcut. They say, oh, I believe in this. I want this philosophy that I believe in implemented, and I want that too. But again, philosophy is point B. We're at point A. We've got to find a way to get to that. And so I think that's what people have to realize. And the more they do, the more they'll get involved, the more we're going to be able to put pressure on these things and change them. I mean, what happened in Tampa won't happen if we're 65-70% of the room. It just won't. And I know it's not easy, but I can tell you that being involved in the party and seeing what's happened in the last 4 years, I can tell you we're winning. It's just a matter of time.
Definitely agreed. what would you, how would you, you kind of touched on this already, but what is the main thing you would say to people to keep them motivated and to be involved in the Republican Party, not just being involved in the liberty movement in general, but to actually be involved in the party? You kind of touched on it, but just like if you have something that you could, pinpoint it down to.
Well, I think that you can support the cause of liberty through any avenue, whether it's campaigning for liberty or activism, whether you're an artist or a filmmaker or whatever it is you want to do. It is even possible to support it through the Democratic Party. I think back in 2008, we had Lindsey Graham ran for Senate, and he had a Democratic opponent named Bob Conley. Well, Bob Conley was a libertarian Democrat. He was a Ron Paul Democrat. And I believe he got about 40% of the vote, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, he did quite well. So I can't tell everybody that they should all do what I'm doing, and it does take a certain kind of stomach to be able to get involved in the party. There are times where you meet people that you strongly disagree with, but this is life. You can't go through life expecting it's all easy. This path is right in front of you, and it's just everything's gonna get knocked down in front of you, and you're gonna get exactly what you want. You're gonna have to negotiate. You're gonna have to be diplomatic. You're gonna have to maneuver through party politics if you want to make a difference. So specifically, I would say about the Republican Party, I think that I'll put it in a nutshell. What I think is that even if the Republicans in general don't fully understand, for example, the free market, I think they at least believe in it in some way, a little bit more than the Democratic Party does. So I think you have a foundation there that is just innately more receptive to a lot of ideas, especially on the economic front, which is primarily what is of concern to most people now with the rise of the Tea Party movement and the economic problems. So I just personally see this path as being much easier through the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's certainly not like a cakewalk or anything. It's certainly challenging. It's been a few challenging months for us here in Oklahoma, but it's, even though you don't necessarily see the reward of your labor right away, it's satisfying to know that you're doing exactly what needs to be done because you're standing up for what's right.
And it takes time to change hearts and minds for sure, but it can be done.
Yeah, it's not something that's gonna happen overnight. And so to those people that are new to this scene, where would you encourage them to go to start learning, or the most basic thing is to kind of get people jump started?
Hey, I'm sorry. I had trouble hearing you again.
No, I'm sorry. What would you do with, what would be the thing you recommend to someone who's just getting involved? Where should they go to learn the basics of all this and kind of get a fresh rundown into things? So maybe because not everyone's just kind of like my family who just jumped into things not knowing anything, being willing to do that. Some people, what would be a good place to start to learn all this stuff and get involved like this?
Well, number one, have confidence in yourself. Of course, as you learn these things, your confidence will expand, because the reality is people come and go from politics. So you may think you're new to all this, but the truth is most people involved in politics are new to all this, because it's always people coming and going, people that get involved for a particular cause they believe in and then they leave, or a particular candidate, etc. But what I would suggest is, if you really feel you're more suited for a strictly activist role, you just can't stand party politics, I would definitely recommend organizations like Campaign for Liberty, or perhaps another organization like that. But I would say if you want to get involved in party politics, go to your state party website, find out where your local unit committee meeting. Usually every county or city has its own unit, and they have regular monthly meetings. Perhaps in some cases it could be a quarterly meeting. But go to those meetings, watch them, sit there, learn Robert's rules. As complicated as it may seem at first, there's a lot of books out there that are focused on abbreviated versions of Robert's rules. Learn the basics. It really takes years and years to totally understand it. But to understand the basics, start with that. You're going to want to go to as many public committee hearings as you can in your state legislature, as well as your own local government, city council, board of supervisors, things like that. Watch the motions that are made. Watch how the process works. Watch how the appropriations work. Watch how the committee process works. So that's what I'm looking at. I think you need to have a well-rounded understanding of all that, in addition to volunteering for a campaign. I think that is absolutely essential. And there's a lot of candidates out there, especially local candidates, that are just begging for people to come and help. So find somebody that you can support locally that help them. You'll be doing it for free, but you will earn so much.
Yeah, it's definitely great suggestions. Since we're pretty much near the end of our time, is there any message you would like to close off with anybody for to give to everyone?
Yeah, basically just what I've been saying, I think repetitively, just stay involved. We can't stay home. I know a lot of folks watched what happened in Tampa, and they were very much discouraged about that experience. But I can tell you what always happens in the past is the good people who believe in something get involved in the party. They see the corruption, and they see the problems, and they see the cheating, and they say, why am I involved? Why am I wasting my time? I'm not going to do this anymore. They abuse us every time. I'm just going to go home. Well, guess what? That's what happened every time in the past when good people have gotten involved and they get sick of it and they leave. And the net result of that is that you only have the people who are corrupt plus the people who are the go-along to get along folks who just go along with it all the time. So that has been the net result of what has been of what it's doing for the last 30, 40 years in party politics. The good people, they show up and they see it and they leave. So we need to make sure that we're staying, because that's the only way that we win, if we don't give up and leave.
Exactly. So if we leave, then they've got what they wanted. They don't want us around anyways. I mean, all people have to do is look at what we went through this year, and they know they don't want us around. So
we've been told to start our own third party. Just in our local GOP told us that, and because they see that we actually are the majority of the people in the GOP, just in our local area now, and I think they're a little bit scared that we're, quote, taking over. But we're not going anywhere.
Well, thanks, Jared, for joining us tonight. It's been a great interview. Everyone has really appreciated it, so thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And who's the candidate you're working for again, just before we close off?
Oh, I'm working for a guy who's running for city council here in Virginia Beach. His name is Kenny Golden, and he's a retired naval commodore, and he's worked on budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So he's probably the most overqualified person who's ever run for city council. But he was an independent candidate for Congress a couple of years ago, and said at a press conference that his first vote would be Ron Paul as Speaker of the House. So that's what you need to know about Kenny Golden.
Great. Thank you yet again, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. You have a good night now. All right, guys, we are done for our show for tonight. We had a great interview with Jared from Virginia here. So our next show, I'm not totally sure when it'll be yet. Maybe within the next month. We're just going to have like a monthly show or something like that. So just keep an eye on our Facebook pages and blogger. And we'll be at the Music City Liberty Fest in Nashville this weekend.
So either try to make it in person or watch the live stream.
So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Oh, also as always, we like to close off with Gotta Believe the Bible to Stay from Hell, so check out atruechurch.info. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks everyone.